For me and the Lord, we got an understanding. We're on a mission from God.
Well, good morning, good people. Mark Holmes here with my buddy Cowboy Joe Boo, as well as the Funky Chicken. And as always, I want to say thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, as well as you ladies, you know that this literally does not work. So we are here 6 days for the NFL draft. 7 days from now, we'll be talking about our first round pick and getting ready for rounds 2 and 3. And hopefully the Cowboys will have made the perfect future Hall of Fame player pick. No guarantees on that because 40% of the players drafted in the first round just don't make it. They stink. The Cowboys have been on the better side of these things. And the question begins is, which way are we going to go? Before we get into all of that talk, let's take care of some other things. Sadiq Charles, and one of the reasons why I think that the Cowboys probably will not be looking at an offensive lineman in this draft because they have made quite a few moves for veteran offensive linemen. Sadiq Charles ends up getting his number, and wow, I'm shocked that Sadiq Charles is getting the number 77.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Tyron Smith's number.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!
Future Hall of Famer
Tyron Smith. Oh shit! Oh shit!
Tyron Smith, who just retired
Oh shit! Oh shit!
2 days ago.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Sadiq Charles is getting that number. This is where you realize numbers don't mean much to Jerry and Stephen Jones, although typically they usually save those great numbers for draft picks that they want to step into those shoes. We saw that with 94 with Randy Gregory. Didn't quite work out that well. We saw that, of course, with 88 with CeeDee Lamb. So far, that one's working out really, really well. So, yeah, that one, I think I would have waited a year before I would do that one. But, hey, I don't own the Dallas Cowboys. It's just, to me, not a great look. It's just not. That one, literally, I woke up and I saw that and I was just blown away by that one. I just literally was. Be that as it may, we also have some other news. Ferguson is engaged. Yes, Ferguson has gotten engaged as of last night. Congratulations to Ferguson. You'll be joining us as married people in the honey-do list. And congratulations, buddy. Congratulations. Now, the question here is, what will the Cowboys do? And I found this morning. It's been my contention, okay? I'm not the draft expert. You want draft experts? Go see my man, Vash Lombardi. But I'm taking words and trying to put it together the best I can. And here's the question you have to ask yourself is, in the past, the Cowboys have always had triplets. Whenever they've been great. We ended up having, of course, Roger Staubach, Drew Pearson, and Tony Dorsett. We, of course, had Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman, and Emmitt Smith. Right now, you got Dak Prescott, and you got CD. You don't really have that third piece. So when you look at this, do you look and say Ashton Jeanty is the best prospect there? And is that our next Emmitt Smith? He's saying the right things. He's literally telling everybody, I'm going to be like Saquon, and I'm coming here to win. Now, talk is cheap. What you do on the field are two different things. But do you look at this and say, if we can get that guy and get our triplets together, and maybe you end up having to make another move for your wide receiver with free agency, am I better suited moving up if Gentry starts to fall? Now, let's listen to this.
The three teams that have a big decision on their hands are probably the Raiders, the Bears, and the Cowboys. And do they want to make that move that the Lions made a couple of years ago that a lot of people scratched their heads about, but then ended up now realizing that Jahmyr Gibbs is a huge part of an offense that is very difficult to stop and can beat you in a variety of ways? The only other thing that could really play against Gentry, who's outstanding, unbelievable, contact balance. It's hard to hit him. It's hard to get him down. All of these different things. Some people say he's Maurice Jones-Drew. Some people say he's LaDainian Tomlinson, which is whoa. But as deep as the class is, this is a historically deep running back class. Does that drop him down? Because some teams pass and go, well, I can get another back that obviously is good, but I can another back in the second and third round, and I have this need that has less players at it. And how does that impact Gentry? I think that's what we're waiting to see. I think the Raiders make a lot of sense. Obviously, Pete Carroll has invested in running backs in the first round before. He has invested in the importance of the running back position. We saw what they did with Marshawn Lynch. They were Rashad Penny in the first round, like Kenneth Walker. Like they've done a lot of different guys, and they've had a focus on running the football. And that's always been a focus of Pete Carroll. But John Spytek comes from the world of Philadelphia and places like that he's been, and they look at the offensive and defensive lines. And does the Raiders do that? That's something that, we've seen the Cowboys do in the past, where we always go, they're going to make this splashy pick. And of course they're looking at backs, and of course they're looking at wide receivers right now, to my understanding. But you could always say, like, they need somebody, to get after the quarterback still. They need to revamp their offensive line in a sense. Like, they somehow always end up going offensive and defensive line. What happens with Ashton Gentry is going to be very, very fascinating, because this is probably the best prospect we've seen. He's in a tier by himself in this draft since Barkley came out, since Zeke Elliott came out, since Leonard Fournette came out, Christian McCaffrey. Since those guys all came out, this is probably the best running back prospect we've seen. And so what ends up happening?
What ends up happening is truly a question. And see, here's where, again, I'm not the draft expert, okay, but this is like one of the many Sports Illustrated ones where they've done their mock drafts. I just want to kind of go through it and give you my taste on it. I think everybody can agree that Cam Ward is going to be the number one pick. I don't think that's rocket science. Cleveland, Travis Hunter, or Abdul Carter. That's pretty much, that's going to be the list. It's going to be one of those two. The Giants will take probably the other one. Don't see Shedeur getting drafted by the Giants at 3, even though they did have another private workout. It may be that they're looking and saying, let's get, either Abdul Carter, get our defense stout. Let's get Travis Hunter, get ourselves our defense and possibly our offense both taken care of, and then maybe sneak back in if Shedeur starts following, or maybe you end up looking at somebody like Jackson Dart. So you can pretty much say that that the first 3 picks will be the 3 best players: Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter. After that, it starts to go in multiple directions. New England, they've made their choice of quarterback, so they're not going to pick up Shedeur. So they're looking and saying, we need to protect him. So Sports Illustrated has them getting Will Campbell, best offensive lineman out there. Jacksonville going defensive line, getting Mason Graham from Michigan. Okay, that's reasonable. The Raiders, to me, are the one that, for what exactly he said, is Pete Carroll loves running backs and things like that. You don't see them going for Shedeur Sanders since they ended up trading for Geno. And they have them actually going offensive line with Armand Melibu. Then the Jets. The Jets taking Tyler Warren, tight end. Okay, that would be interesting. And then Carolina taking Mike Green, edge rusher. Now, keep this in mind with the Dallas Cowboys. When they draft in the first round, they like to get the number 1 prospect at a position. They figure that if everybody's consensus on a player, then he's probably pretty good. And so thus far, we've gotten edge rushers, offensive line, quarterbacks taken off the board, right? We got a tight end, We got O-line, D-line, O-line, edge rusher, and so on. So for me, I don't see the Cowboys looking at offensive line first round because of that. I don't look at them looking at edge rusher because now you're down to third edge rusher if it starts falling like this. But what you do have right now is you have Ashton Genty, the number one running back, slipping. This is where I say if he gets past the Raiders, that the Cowboys will start having some talks about going and moving up for Genty. And I wouldn't be mad if they did. So Carolina, they have getting Mike Green, edge rusher. New Orleans, you have to figure they have to get a quarterback with Derek Carr. So then there goes Shedeur back in the top 10. And so now you're only a couple of spaces away. Now the problem is, conceivably, they have Austin Genty going to the Bears. The Bears grab Genty to strengthen one of their weakest position groups, running back. Coach Ben Johnson should have no issues feeding a two-headed backfield, much like he did in Detroit with DeAndre Swift and Genty. Now, this is where you might be able to entice the Bears and say, Bears, we'll give you our first and our second. You're moving back two spaces. I'm sorry, first and third. You're moving back two spaces, and you're getting an extra pick. San Francisco, with Christian McCaffrey's not going to take him. And that would be the case to move up. If you're only talking about two spaces, a first and a third probably will do it. We move back two spaces with a first and a third, getting a first and a third from the Eagles to get Micah Parsons. That one would be doable. I don't see him moving up into, the top 6 past the Raiders, but if he falls, I could see that happening. If that doesn't happen, we've seen the Cowboys linked to 2 wide receivers. And Tataroka McMillan, who is 6'4", big body, jump ball guy, big target, possession receiver, that would be a guy who you basically are doing jump balls with Dak Prescott. You pair him up with CeeDee Lamb, that's going to open up things a lot. That will really open things up a lot. His draft grades, he's a 6.4, will become a good starter within 2 years. He's a junior, 6'4", 219 pounds, 10-inch hands, arms 31.5. His production score at the combine ranks second at 84. His athleticism, a 71, which is 30th wide receivers. But his combined grade, of course, would be second with an 85. Now, keep in mind what I just said to you. Cowboys like a top prospect, the number one prospect at a position. That gives you this between him and Matthew Golden. The difference between Matthew Golden and, of course, McMillan is about 5 inches. Golden is shorter and he's faster. And you want speed or do you want size? Either way, you're getting top production, a top prospect, or their very first wide receiver off the board. I can't tell you which way they're going to go. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see which way they do go in this scenario, how the draft falls. And nobody knows. Sometimes they think, this is just going to be a straightforward draft and boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden something crazy happens. If, let's say, the Steelers get crazy and say, we're going to trade up and we're going to try and get Shedeur, then that hits the panic button then for New Orleans. Let's say Genty, somebody moves up in front of the Raiders. Boom. All of a sudden, everybody's draft board goes to shit, and it starts scrambling. We'll find out in a week how it goes. Either way, look for the Cowboys to get a number one prospect. And to me, that's the wide receiver, of course, and the running back. And I know, go ahead and say it. Thank you, Captain Obvious. What still is crazy is people don't know what to make of Shedeur Sanders. Some people are trying to say Shedeur Sanders is arrogant in things that, he's just average and so on. They are downplaying him. Now, you don't know if this is kind of being put out there by teams that are hoping that he'll fall, the disinformation and so on. But I don't know. Now, here's where it's kind of crazy because this morning on Get Up, they literally said Shedeur Sanders is like Kirk Cousins.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!
Was that meant to be derogatory? Because, actually, if you're Shedeur Sanders, that means you weren't a bust and you got paid a lot of money. That means you weren't Josh Rosen. Let's go to the tape on this.
So I got to assume he had some kind of protection. Okay, on we go. 6 days to the draft. And we're going to play a game called Reminds Me Of. All right, so Tannenbaum, he scouts these guys. He does all the looking at it. He was a GM. He knows the history of the league. He knows the current players. So we're going to take some of these quarterbacks, and I'm going to ask you, who do they remind you of? Cam Ward, he's going to be the #1 pick. Who does he remind you of?
Greeny, Josh Allen. There's a ruggedness to the way Cam Ward plays that really reminds me of Josh Allen and their arm strength. And coming out, they both had similar yards per attempt and rushing yards. The athleticism of Cam Ward is very underrated, as was Josh Allen's, and Tennessee may be getting a star.
Josh Allen coming out, there were so many questions about him that we remember, about the accuracy. Can it be? And, Brian Daboll, I think deserves, got and deserves a lot of the credit for developing a guy who had ridiculous physical tools. Cam Ward is further along at this stage than Josh Allen was coming out of school.
Played in a more competitive environment. Josh Allen was at Wyoming, right? There were questions, and he was a guy that wasn't, he recruited out of high school and all that stuff. So, that's interesting. You know me, though. I'm always, no one ever compares him to Rex Grossman. It's always a superstar.
Well, you're always, just hold on a minute. We got a few coming up. Maybe not Rex Grossman. But, that obviously, right, when you see a guy with that kind of size and all the rest of it, that's the prototype that comes to mind.
Absolutely. The biggest difference, you look at Josh Allen, he walks in a room, 6'4", 6'5", he is just massive. Cam Ward doesn't have that same stature, so that would be the only thing. But to your point, Mike T, when you have the fear of playing against Josh Allen because he could stand there, throw the ball 60 yards down the field, or he could scramble and make 6 guys miss on the defensive line and run for a touchdown, that's the fear that it puts on the defense that is very scary.
Maybe best put is, if this player achieves the maximum that he's capable of, that's who he becomes. Now here's the one you'll find a little more interesting. Let's get to Shedeur Sanders, the most talked about player. Who does he remind you of?
Kirk Cousins, Greeny. When you watch Shedeur play, he's extremely accurate. And look at his footwork here. Very good fundamentals. The arm strength is good, not great, but you can win a lot of games, as we've seen Kirk Cousins do, because of the accuracy, the anticipation. And by the way, this is, if you like Shedeur, Kirk Cousins' career in college, 64%. Shedeur Sanders, 71%. The critics will say, but there's a lot of checkdowns. I don't care. 71% completion is outstanding. J-Mac, you know that, whether you're in practice or not. I think that really bodes well for Shedeur.
So amongst the draft geek universe, of which I am now very much a member, the real debate is this one. If you take a quarterback in the first round and he turns into Kirk Cousins, was that a successful pick? Cousins has had a very good, remember he was a 4th-round pick.
He was.
He's had a very good career. He's obviously made an enormous amount of money. He's not a superstar player and all of that. When you draft a quarterback at number 3, if he's Kirk Cousins, was that a successful pick? At number 21, is it a successful pick? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, I think if you're drafting at 3, you have higher hopes. If you're drafting at 3, you want a Hall of Famer. Right, you want that's your goal, right? Somebody's going. So, Kirk Cousins is on his 3rd team. He's had a very good career. A lot of people would sign up right now for Kirk Cousins' career. But to your point, he's a 4th-round pick. I remember Mike Shanahan was the head coach of Washington when he made the pick, and I was asking him about because they had picked RG3, they had traded up.
Right.
So and Shanahan told me we had a 2nd-round grade on him, and he's sitting there in the 4th. He compared him to Drew Brees because of the way he anticipated throws coming out. So, even in Shanahan's best case scenario, this was a second-round pick. So people want to talk about just Shedeur going to fall. I just really don't think people are looking at him as that top 5 talent.
So here is the argument I always make when this conversation comes up. If you're going to hold the standard to he's got to be a Hall of Famer, well, then you're setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah.
The percentage of players who come into the league who wind up in the Hall of Fame, that's a ridiculously high bar to set. I would argue that with the 3rd pick in the draft, if you take a quarterback and he is a good starter for a decade, that was a successful pick. And Kirk Cousins has undoubtedly been that, which is why I keep saying, if you're the Giants and you need a quarterback, I take this guy.
And GMs get it wrong all the time. Mike T is sitting right to the left of me. They don't know what the hell they're doing half the time. And I look at it, sometimes you have to look at a player. You compare it to Kirk Cousins. If you had to do a redraft and you looked at the same quarterbacks coming out that year, where would you have drafted Kirk Cousins? Because he would have been a lot higher than the 4th round when you look at when it was Andrew Luck, it was RG3, Brock Osweiler was in that draft. So he would have been way higher. So yes, for Shedeur Sanders, if you're going to see that, then you would draft him high knowing he could have been a Kirk Cousins.
Same draft, Ryan Tannehill was what, the 7th pick, right? So like, do we look on that as right? So I think that's
you draft him?
Very true.
Inherited. Is that another mistake, J-Mac?
I don't want to go down the long list, so we don't have that much time.
2 years ago, Will Levis is the first pick of the 2nd round.
Right.
They're already moving on from Will Levis, but no one's screaming, what a bust, right? Because if you are the Giants and you need a quarterback and you're picking 34 and you have a group of quarterbacks, you think at least one of these guys is going to be available and we like them all to a similar extent, you take the monster. You take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter at number 3 because you're sitting there at 3 getting one of the top 2 guys in the draft. That's value.
Oh, let me do one more. Mike T. Jalen Milroe has suddenly become a person of enormous interest in this draft. He's accepted an invitation to Green Bay next week. A lot of people now think he may go in round 1.
Because there's not many quarterbacks out there.
Jalen Hurts, this is uncanny. Both had 71 total touchdowns at the University of Alabama. They're only 2 pounds apart. And Jalen Hurts, very much germane to this conversation, was developed, took him some time. I think Jalen Milroe, very similar, like high floor.
The weight piece of this, I think, is what took me aback when you first said it, because when you just look at them, Hurts looks so solid, right? I mean, he just looks so much bigger than Milroe. But we had Jalen Milroe in studio. He's bigger than you think he is. He's an extraordinarily gifted athlete. And the question is, can you develop him into a quarterback? It has happened, obviously, with Hurts. If you do that with Milroe, you've got something.
That's the case for all these guys. There's no guarantee on anybody. You know, we have seen so many busts that have been can't miss guys. And this is where you've got to rely on your instincts and your scouting department to make sure that this is true, that this is the guy. And a lot of times I think we underestimate college careers, how long and how many starts that they have. You can look at somebody like Trey Lance, who basically did not have that many starts under his belt. He wowed you, but just didn't have a lot. We can look at Tyler Guyton, who has time, didn't have a lot of starts behind him. This is where you may be better off having a guy that's got more experience in college. And one other thing I also put out here too is I believe that you have to look at where a player plays. Because, you know, not to disrespect any schools or anything like that, but if you're playing in the Southeast Conference, a conference that puts 50-plus players in the NFL a year, then you understand that they may not be on an elite team, but they're playing against elite talent. This is where Dak Prescott was underrated for where he was picked, because he's playing at Mississippi State going against the LSUs, not with a lot of talent that's around him. Whereas you go to LSU, you've got tons of blue chippers that are around that are going to make you better because you have a lot more talent with you. I hope that makes sense to people. So look at how much experience do they have. Look at the players around them. Because now, when you go from college, you might be, you know, a big fish in a little pond. Now, you're out in the ocean with all these sharks. And it's not the same thing. Alrighty, good people. We'll keep up with any news that happens with the Dallas Cowboys. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. And it's going to be nice today. 79 degrees and warm. The rain is gone. The wind is gone. And I'm going to be out working on some cabinets. Have a good one, and you know how we roll. We got to get out of here.
I can't stand it anymore. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Stewardess, please let me handle this.
I've got to get
Calm down. Now get back to your seat. I'll take care of this. Calm down. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Doctor, you're wanted on the phone. Everything's gonna be all right. Please.
Sister, please, I'll handle this.
Yourself.